Several errant Israelites, including as it is written, are attempting to use Amos 3, 1-2 as a means to say that Yahweh only loves the actual descendants of Jacob. These so-called teachers are basically attempting to make Yahweh into a racist, and therefore excuse their own racism. But the reality is that Yahweh was talking about them as a nation, a group, and his plan was to use them to build the base of his own family on earth. If he loved them solely based on their genetics, then why did Moses have to bargain with his life in order to keep Yahweh from destroying them? Lineage is meaningless when you are unrighteous and when you turn your back on Yahweh to serve other gods. Genesis 28 verse 14. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Zechariah 14 verse 17. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, Yahweh of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. Zechariah tells us there would be a time when all the families of the earth would come to Jerusalem to worship. Don't blush simply because Yahweh gave Israel the law. Does that mean it was only for Israel? No. Other nations didn't have a Moses, didn't have prophets, didn't have an Ark of the Covenant, and didn't have messiahs. Israel was the nation through which the world would receive these things. All those who would come out of the world and be holy to the word of Elohim. Just as Yeshua was a representative of Yahweh, Israel was a representative and ambassador of the world, a mediator. Because we were just like everyone else in nature, if we could be taught, then no human was beyond correction. Yahweh set one example for all. Yeshua was that personal example. Israel was the national example. Israel is not an individual. When Yahweh talks about Israel, he's not talking about one person. It is a corporate unit, just like the unit of Adam and Eve. A nation rises and falls together, but it is a single unit made up of many units, like cells make up organs that make up the human body. And so if one man took spoils when they were all told not to, then they were all held guilty. If you take what doesn't belong to you, is it only your hand that is guilty? The other nations were held to the same standard, and were also punished as groups according to the weight of that group's sins, just as it was in Sodom. He dealt with nations because nations had leaders and followers, and the few often set the course for the many. A nation isn't just a family, or otherwise how could two brothers be two different nations? They can be two nations because they choose to be. All people have the opportunity to choose to follow Yahweh and recognize His sovereign authority. It was our choice that got us into sin, and it is our choice that must get us out. Anything else would be unjust, and that is not a description of Yahweh. Human beings are like sheep. This is why the symbol is used so heavily. Sheep will follow other sheep. If one walks into a slaughter, they are all walking into a slaughter. I want to read you a few facts about sheep. 1. Sheep are prey animals with a strong gregarious instinct. 2. The dominance hierarchy of Ophis Aries and its natural inclination to follow a leader to new pastures were the pivotal factors in it being one of the first domesticated livestock species. 3. All sheep have a tendency to congregate close to other members of the flock, although this behavior varies with breed. 4. In regions where sheep have no natural predators, none of the native breeds of sheep exhibit a strong flocking behavior. 5. Sheep can also become hefted to one particular local pasture. 6. Flock dynamics in sheep are as a rule only exhibited in a group of 4 or more sheep. 7. In displaying flocking, sheep have a strong lead-follow tendency, and a leader, often as not, is simply the first sheep to move. However, sheep do establish a pecking order through physical displays of dominance. 8. Primarily among rams, horn size is a factor in the flock hierarchy. Rams with different size horns may be less inclined to fight to establish pecking order, while rams with similarly sized horns are more so. 9. Sheep become highly stressed when separated from their flock members. 10. Relationships in flocks tend to be closest among related sheep. In mixed breed flocks, same breed subgroups tend to form, and the ewe and her direct descendants often move as a unit within large flocks. It is not just our nature as humans to follow, but also to pick leaders either by the size of one's horn or by fighting. So what we end up with is many mixed breeds of human species, with same breed subgroups of humans under different men who lead them. If the man is righteous, the sheep people, or sheeple, tend to follow him in righteousness. At times, people simply follow the first person to do something, like Eve, and anyone who has read through the history of Israel and its kings can see that. And this is a nation that was supposed to be following after Yahweh. But they wanted a king like the other nations. They wanted a dominant ram like the other nations, so Yahweh gave it to them and allowed it to continue. This understanding of sheep is the main reason that I exist. I exist to challenge the horns of those who falsely claim to speak for Yah. I exist to cut off those horns and make of them a shofar, to cause people to follow Yahweh, not these foolish and arrogant men who lust for power. Sheep mentality. If you don't have the attitude and mindset of a sheep, you probably have the attitude and mindset of a ram looking for dominance. This behavior is written on our DNA and taught through years of experience. But we are not to be wild sheep. We have a shepherd. Mark 6:34. And Yeshua, when he came out, saw much people and was moved with compassion towards them, because they were as sheep, not having a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. Praying that you now have at least some understanding of sheep and how societies form, and how nations are sheep that are led by dominant members of their families, and how the disposition and moral compass of the nation can be set by its leader. You should be able to grasp what Israel truly meant. The firstborn of Yahweh was sent intentionally into other nations, so that the world could see and follow them who were already being led by Yahweh. Even if scattered, if they remembered themselves and who their shepherd is, they can be the rams and the sheep that lead all the sheep around them to Yahweh. And that is why Yeshua said to his disciples, "Go ye therefore and teach all nations." The other nations needed an example. The further historically they got away from Abraham and Noah and had new leaders, the more they ventured off on their own into sin and into wickedness. Understand that just because your ancestor was righteous doesn't mean you will be righteous too. Even though we are one family, it is human beings who choose to divide themselves into races, into creeds, into religions, into cultures, into civilizations. We all began in the garden. We all made the same decision. It was the corruptive influence of Hasatan that led us out. Because we were like sheep, we allowed him to have dominance over us because he had a bigger horn. And so like fools, our nations fought each other for dominance, for a pecking order beneath Hasatan, who had been elected to be the god of this world by nothing short of a democratic process. That is why Yahweh had to create a people of his own, to show other people what being his sheep was all about, so that they would also want to follow. By building a reputation with them, he hoped to regain the faith that he had with Adam and Eve. The plan of salvation was for them and for their children. The Hebrew word ger, used in Genesis 23:4-6, shows us what stranger means. This is Abraham seeking a burying place for his wife Sarah, but he didn't have a natural right or inheritance. Ger means sojourner, a temporary inhabitant, a newcomer lacking inherited rights. It is also used of foreigners in Israel through conceded rights. Exodus 22:21. Thou shalt neither vex a stranger, nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. Next chapter, verse 9. Also, thou shalt not oppress a stranger, for ye know the heart of a stranger, seeing ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. These two texts refute all the voice hatred that pseudo-Israelites do on the streets against people they do not know, solely on the basis of their skin color and nationality. You do not know whether or not a person walking down the street is righteous or unrighteous, and people didn't avoid being stoned to death just because they were black or could trace their DNA to Jacob.